What if the very thing you believe is helping you relax, sleep better, and take the edge off is quietly reshaping your brain in ways you never intended? Cannabis use after 40 has surged across the United States, fueled by legalization, cultural acceptance, and the comforting narrative that it is natural, plant-based, and therefore safe. Many adults in midlife see it as a reasonable alternative to alcohol, a gentler substitute for prescription medications, or a private ritual to soften the sharp edges of stress. After decades of responsibility, careers, parenting, financial pressure, and relentless productivity, the promise of relief feels earned. But relief and reward are not the same thing, and understanding that distinction may be one of the most important decisions you make in this chapter of your life. As we age, the brain does not remain static, it evolves. Dopamine signaling changes, executive function subtly shifts, and memory circuits become more vulnerable to disruption. Tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, interacts directly with the endocannabinoid system, a network deeply involved in mood regulation, motivation, appetite, and cognitive processing. When that system is repeatedly stimulated, especially in an aging brain, the experience of reward can gradually recalibrate. What once felt like occasional relaxation can begin to influence baseline mood, drive, and emotional resilience. This is not alarmism, it is neurobiology. Inspired by the work of Dr. Anna Lembke, who emphasizes the balance between pleasure and pain in the brain, we must consider how repeated dopamine spikes, even from socially accepted substances, can tip the internal scale. The brain is constantly seeking equilibrium. When pleasure pathways are activated frequently, compensatory mechanisms engage, receptors downregulate, sensitivity decreases. The result is subtle but profound. More of the substance is required to achieve the same effect. Tolerance forms, not because of moral weakness, but because of adaptive biology. In midlife, when cognitive clarity and motivation are essential for navigating complex responsibilities, even small shifts in attention, short-term memory, and reward sensitivity can accumulate. The question is not whether cannabis is categorically good or bad. The question is how it interacts with your specific neurochemistry at this stage of life. Occasional use for some individuals may not produce measurable impairment, yet frequent or high-potency exposure increases the probability of dependency, particularly for those carrying chronic stress, unresolved trauma, mood instability, or a history of substance misuse. Withdrawal symptoms, such as irritability, anxiety, and sleep disturbance can emerge when use stops, revealing a physiological adaptation that often goes unrecognized. Marketing narratives rarely discuss this. The image presented is one of harmless relaxation, creative enhancement, and therapeutic benefit. But science asks a more disciplined question. What is the long-term impact on cognition, emotional regulation, and intrinsic motivation? In midlife, you are not simply managing the present moment. You are shaping the trajectory of your later decades. Every habit compounds. Every neurochemical pattern reinforces itself over time. Choosing to examine cannabis use with intellectual honesty is not an act of fear. It is an act of agency. It means refusing to outsource your health decisions to cultural trends. It means recognizing that the aging brain deserves careful stewardship. The real empowerment lies not in blind acceptance or rigid rejection, but in informed, deliberate choice grounded in evidence rather than assumption. In the middle of this conversation, a deeper question begins to surface, and it is more unsettling than it first appears. What if the risk is not dramatic collapse, but gradual erosion? The aging brain is remarkably adaptive, yet it is also more sensitive to repeated chemical influence than many realize. Dopamine pathways that once fired with youthful elasticity now respond with more restraint. Executive functions such as planning, impulse control, and sustained attention require greater metabolic support. Memory consolidation depends on finely tuned communication between the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. When THC repeatedly stimulates cannabinoid receptors in this shifting landscape, the effects are not always obvious in the beginning. There may be mild forgetfulness, subtle procrastination, a slightly blunted emotional range, or a quiet decline in intrinsic drive. None of these changes announce themselves loudly. They whisper. And that whisper can persist for years before anyone asks whether it is connected to a nightly routine that once seemed harmless. The suspense lies in the cumulative nature of neuroaptation. High-potency cannabis products available today bear little resemblance to those of previous decades. Greater concentrations of THC produce stronger psychoactive effects, and with stronger effects comes a more pronounced dopamine spike. According to the neurobiological framework often discussed by Dr. Anna Lembke, repeated surges of pleasure are followed by compensatory dips below baseline. Over time, the brain's attempt to maintain equilibrium results in a chronic state of relative dopamine deficit. This does not necessarily manifest as overt depression, but it can appear as reduced motivation, diminished satisfaction in everyday activities, and increased reliance on the substance to feel normal. For adults over 40 who are navigating demanding careers, caring for aging parents, supporting children, and planning for retirement, even modest reductions in cognitive sharpness and emotional resilience can carry significant consequences. The risk is magnified for individuals with underlying anxiety disorders, mood instability, or previous substance use history. Cannabis may initially reduce tension or facilitate sleep, yet dependence can form insidiously. Tolerance drives escalation, and escalation reinforces neuroaptation. When use stops, irritability, restlessness, sleep disturbance, and anxiety can surface, not as proof of personal weakness, but as evidence of a brain recalibrating itself. The most challenging aspect is that social validation often shields this pattern from scrutiny. If a substance is legal, marketed as therapeutic, and widely accepted, self-questioning feels unnecessary. But legality does not equate to neurobiological neutrality. Evidence-based evaluation demands that we examine longitudinal outcomes, cognitive testing data, and clinical observations rather than anecdotes. Some studies suggest associations between chronic cannabis use and impairments in attention, processing speed, and memory, particularly with sustained high-frequency exposure. While causation is complex and individual variability is significant, the signal is strong enough to warrant reflection. Midlife is a period where strategic clarity matters. Financial decisions, relational commitments, and health behaviors compound over decades. A subtle dampening of drive or focus may not disrupt 1 week, but across years it can redirect an entire trajectory. The hidden risk is not catastrophe, it is quiet compromise. It is the gradual narrowing of possibility that occurs when the brain's reward system becomes less responsive to ordinary effort and achievement. To recognize this potential is not to demonize cannabis, but to confront the reality that every psychoactive substance carries trade-offs. The aging brain deserves careful attention precisely because it is the foundation of autonomy, wisdom, and purposeful living in the decades ahead. The most powerful shift does not come from fear, and it does not come from denial. It comes from disciplined awareness. When you reach your 40s and beyond, you stand at a neurological crossroads where the habits you reinforce will echo into your 60s, 70s, and 80s. This is the season where preservation of cognitive vitality becomes an investment strategy, not merely a health preference. Cannabis may offer moments of relaxation, altered perception, or temporary relief from stress, but the deeper question is whether it strengthens or subtly weakens your long-term capacity for clarity, motivation, and emotional regulation. Every time you introduce an external substance to regulate an internal state, you train the brain to rely less on its intrinsic regulatory mechanisms. Neuroplasticity does not retire with age. It continues shaping itself around repeated behavior. If relief consistently arrives through THC rather than through exercise, restorative sleep hygiene, social connection, meaningful work, or contemplative practice, the brain encodes that pathway as efficient. Over time, efficiency becomes dependency, and dependency narrows resilience. This is the philosophical and scientific intersection emphasized in the work associated with Dr. Anna Lembke, where the balance between pleasure and pain determines whether we move towards strength or fragility. The brain's reward circuitry is designed to respond to effort-based achievements, to incremental mastery, and to social bonding. When a chemical shortcut repeatedly stimulates that circuitry, the motivational architecture can recalibrate. The result is not necessarily dysfunction, but a subtle reduction in the willingness to tolerate discomfort in pursuit of growth. Midlife is inherently uncomfortable at times. Careers plateau or pivot. Children become independent. Aging parents require care. Physical stamina changes. These transitions demand psychological endurance. If cannabis becomes the primary coping mechanism, the opportunity to cultivate deeper adaptive skills may diminish. Evaluating safety versus marketing requires intellectual honesty. Claims of natural origin do not negate pharmacological potency. The endocannabinoid system is complex, and THC's interaction with it is measurable and profound. Occasional, mindful use for certain individuals may coexist with cognitive health, yet high-frequency, high-potency consumption increases the statistical probability of impairment and cannabis use disorder. Risk factors include chronic stress, untreated mood conditions, social isolation, and prior substance use. Recognizing these variables is not about judgment, it is about precision. Empowerment in midlife means asking rigorous questions. Is my use escalating? Do I need more to achieve the same effect? Do I experience irritability or sleep disturbance when I abstain? Has my motivation for meaningful pursuits declined? Honest answers illuminate whether a behavior is serving you or quietly shaping you. The ultimate motivation is not abstinence for its own sake. It is sovereignty over your neurobiology. When you choose behaviors that enhance baseline dopamine regulation through disciplined habits, you expand your capacity for sustained fulfillment. You protect memory circuits, executive function, and emotional equilibrium. You model informed decision-making for the generations watching you. Cannabis after 40 is not a simple binary of safe or dangerous. It is a nuanced equation influenced by frequency, potency, mental health history, and lifestyle context. The hidden risk emerges when curiosity is replaced by assumption. Reclaiming agency requires evidence-based reflection and deliberate boundaries. Your brain is the command center of your future, and its stewardship is a responsibility that compounds with time. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.